The afternoon sun beat down on the highway just outside Fort Henderson Military Base. Traffic moved steadily as soldiers and civilians alike made their way in and out of the base entrance. It was a typical Wednesday. Nothing special. Nothing out of the ordinary. That's when Officer Derek Matthews spotted the black sedan. There was nothing particularly suspicious about the car. It wasn't speeding. It wasn't swerving. The driver wasn't doing anything wrong. But something about it caught Matthews' eye, and within seconds, his patrol car's lights were flashing red and blue. Inside the sedan, Sergeant Thomas Williams saw the lights in his rearview mirror and let out a quiet sigh. He'd just finished a 12-hour shift on base and was heading home to get some rest. His body ached from the day's training exercises, and all he wanted was a hot shower in his bed. But now he was being pulled over, and he had no idea why. Thomas carefully guided his car to the shoulder of the road, making sure to use his turn signal. He put the car in park, turned off the engine, and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. His military training kicked in automatically. Stay calm, stay respectful. Follow instructions. Officer Matthews approached the car with heavy footsteps, his hand resting on his belt near his weapon. His jaw was set tight and his eyes were hard as he looked through the driver's side window. Before Thomas could even speak, Matthews was tapping aggressively on the glass. "License and registration," Matthews barked. "Now." Thomas kept his hands visible as he spoke. "Good afternoon, officer. Can you tell me why you pulled me over?" Matthews' eyes narrowed. "I'll ask the questions here. License and registration. Don't make me ask again." "Yes, sir," Thomas replied calmly. "I'm going to reach for my wallet in my back pocket. Is that okay?" Matthews didn't respond, just watched with suspicious eyes as Thomas slowly retrieved his wallet. Inside was his driver's license, his military ID, and his base access card. He handed his license through the window along with his military identification. Matthews barely glanced at the license before his attention fixed on the military ID. He held it up, studying it with obvious skepticism. "What's this supposed to be?" "That's my military identification, sir. I'm a sergeant stationed at Fort Henderson. I was just leaving base after my shift." The officer let out a short, harsh laugh. "Sure you are. You know how many fake IDs I see every week? People trying to scam their way onto the base, pretending to be soldiers?" Thomas felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his voice steady. "Sir, that's a legitimate military ID. You can verify it with the base if you need to." "My commanding officer is—" "I don't need to verify anything," Matthews cut him off. "Step out of the vehicle." "Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. Can you please tell me why you stopped me?" Matthews' face darkened. "I said step out of the vehicle. Are you refusing to comply with a lawful order?" Thomas knew this was going wrong, but he also knew better than to escalate the situation. He took a slow breath and opened his car door, stepping out with his hands visible. He stood at his full height, 6 feet tall, still in good shape from years of military service. "Turn around and put your hands on the vehicle," Matthews ordered. "Sir, what am I being detained for?" "Do it now." Thomas complied, placing his palms flat on the roof of his car. He could feel other drivers slowing down as they passed, curious about what was happening. Some were fellow soldiers who recognized him. He could see their confused faces through the corner of his eye, but Matthews waved them away aggressively whenever anyone slowed down too much. Matthews began patting Thomas down roughly, checking his pockets. "What else you got in this car? Any weapons? Drugs?" "No, sir. Nothing illegal. I'm coming straight from the base where I work. We'll see about that." Matthews walked to the passenger side and opened the door without asking permission. He began rifling through the car, pulling open the glove compartment, checking under the seats, tossing Thomas's gym bag onto the roadside. Thomas watched as his belongings were scattered on the ground. His workout clothes, his protein shaker, a book he'd been reading, all treated like evidence of a crime he hadn't committed. His military jacket, the one with his unit patch and rank clearly displayed, lay in the dirt. "Sir, do you have probable cause to search my vehicle?" Matthews straightened up, his face red. "You questioning me? You think you know the law better than I do?" "No, sir. I'm just trying to understand what's happening." Another car slowed down, this time a pickup truck with 2 soldiers inside. They were looking at Thomas with recognition and concern. One of them pulled out his phone. "Keep moving," Matthews shouted at them. "Nothing to see here." But the soldier with the phone didn't put it away. He held it up, pointing it toward the scene. Matthews noticed, and his expression shifted, something between anger and awareness that he was being watched. Thomas saw the phone too, and while part of him was grateful someone was documenting this, another part worried it would make things worse. He'd heard stories from other soldiers, other black men in uniform about encounters like this. He'd always hoped it wouldn't happen to him, but here he was, standing on the side of the road, being treated like a criminal for no reason he could understand. "I'm going to need you to take a seat on the curb," Matthews said, pointing to the concrete barrier along the shoulder. "Officer Matthews," Thomas read the name tag, keeping his voice respectful. "I've been cooperative. I've answered your questions. I've provided my identification. Can you please tell me what violation I've committed? Suspicious behavior, possible identity fraud, and now you're being uncooperative. I've done everything you've asked. Sit down on that curb before I make you sit down." Thomas walked to the curb and sat down, his pressed slacks getting dusty from the dirt and debris. He watched as Matthews returned to his patrol car, probably running his license. He knew what would come back, a clean record. No warrants, no violations, just a soldier trying to drive home after work. More cars passed. More phones came out. Thomas sat there, hands on his knees, trying to maintain his dignity, while being humiliated on the side of a public highway. He thought about his years of service, the missions he'd completed, the times he'd put his life on the line. And here he was, being treated like this just minutes from the base where he worked. Matthews was taking his time in the patrol car, and Thomas knew this was about more than just a traffic stop. This was about something else entirely, something that had nothing to do with what he'd done and everything to do with who he was. The sun continued to beat down, traffic continued to flow, and Thomas Williams sat on that curb, waiting to see just how much worse this day was going to get. Officer Matthews finally emerged from his patrol car after what felt like an eternity. Thomas could see the slight confusion on the officer's face as he looked at his computer screen one more time before walking back. The license had come back clean, just as Thomas knew it would. No warrants, no violations, nothing, but instead of admitting his mistake and letting Thomas go, Matthews seemed even more determined to find something wrong. "Stand up," Matthews ordered as he approached. Thomas rose to his feet, brushing the dust from his pants. "Did everything check out, officer?" Matthews ignored the question. "I'm going to search your vehicle more thoroughly." "You can wait here. Sir, you already searched my car. You didn't find anything because there's nothing to find. I'm a soldier. I follow the rules." "Oh, you're a soldier?" Matthews said with heavy sarcasm. "Funny, because that ID looked pretty fake to me. Real convenient having a military ID right when you get pulled over near a base." Thomas felt his frustration building but kept it in check. "Officer, you can call the base. You can verify my identity in 5 minutes. My commander is Colonel Peterson. The base operator can connect you directly. I don't need to call anyone. What I need is for you to stop telling me how to do my job." Matthews pulled open the car door again and began a more aggressive search, pulling up floor mats, opening every compartment, checking behind the sun visors. A work truck slowed down as it passed. The driver, an older man who appeared to be a veteran based on his cap, shook his head disapprovingly at the scene. Matthews noticed and shouted, "Move along! This doesn't concern you." Thomas stood there watching his car being torn apart. His CDs were pulled from the center console. His registration and insurance papers were scattered across the passenger seat. A bottle of water rolled onto the pavement. It was all so unnecessary, so excessive. "Why are you doing this?" Thomas asked quietly, more to himself than to Matthews, but Matthews heard him. "What did you say?" "I asked why you're doing this, sir. I haven't broken any laws. You pulled me over for no reason. You're searching my car without cause. I've been respectful and cooperative. So I'm asking, why?" Matthews slammed the car door shut and walked up to Thomas, standing uncomfortably close. "You want to know why? Because I don't like your attitude. Because I don't believe you're who you say you are, and because I'm the law here, not you." Another vehicle approached, this time a military jeep with 2 soldiers in uniform. They slowed down significantly when they saw Thomas. The passenger, a young corporal, called out through the window, "Hey, Sergeant Williams, you okay?" Matthews spun around. "Keep moving. This is police business." The corporal looked conflicted, clearly wanting to help but unsure what to do. The driver, a female sergeant, pulled out her phone and made a call while they drove slowly past. Thomas knew what that meant. Word was getting back to the base. His unit would know soon. His commander would know. That's what I thought, Matthews muttered, watching the military vehicle disappear down the road. Your little friends can't help you out here. Sir, those are my colleagues. They're concerned because they can see I'm being mistreated. Mistreated? Matthews laughed harshly. You don't know what mistreated looks like. But keep running your mouth and you'll find out. Thomas clenched his jaw, fighting to keep his composure. Every instinct told him to stand up for himself, to demand the respect he'd earned through years of service. But he also knew that in this moment, with this officer, his rights didn't seem to matter. Matthews walked back to his patrol car and grabbed his radio. Thomas couldn't hear the entire conversation, but he caught bits and pieces. Suspicious individual? Possible stolen vehicle. Uncooperative. Need backup. His heart sank. This wasn't ending. It was getting worse. Within 10 minutes, another patrol car arrived. A younger officer stepped out, looking uncertain as he approached Matthews. They spoke in low voices, and Thomas saw the younger officer glance at him several times, with what looked like doubt in his eyes. The younger officer walked over to Thomas. Sir, can you tell me what happened here? Finally, Thomas thought, someone willing to listen. Officer, I was pulled over without cause. I've provided my identification, including my military ID. My license came back clean. But Officer Matthews has been searching my vehicle and detaining me for over 30 minutes now, and I still don't know what law I've supposedly broken. The younger officer nodded slowly. Can I see your military ID again? Thomas still had it in his hand. He passed it over, and the young officer examined it carefully. His expression changed slightly. A flicker of recognition or perhaps concern. This looks legitimate to me, the younger officer said to Matthews. I'll determine what's legitimate. Matthews snapped back. I'm the senior officer here. But sir, if he's military and we're holding him without cause, are you questioning my judgment? The younger officer hesitated, then stepped back. Thomas could see the internal struggle on his face. Here was someone who seemed to recognize the situation was wrong, but wasn't willing to stand up to his superior. It was a small tragedy playing out in real time. By now, several more cars had slowed to watch. Some people were filming openly. Matthews noticed the phones and seemed to feed off the attention, his chest puffing out as if he were performing a public service. Turn around and put your hands behind your back, Matthews suddenly ordered. Thomas froze. What? Why? You're being detained for disorderly conduct and obstruction of justice. I haven't done either of those things. I've been completely cooperative. You've been argumentative and hostile since I pulled you over. That's disorderly conduct. I've been respectful and calm. Everyone here can see that. Those people filming can see that. Matthews pulled out his handcuffs. Last chance. Hands behind your back or I'll charge you with resisting arrest too. Thomas looked at the younger officer, hoping for some intervention, some voice of reason, but the man looked away. He looked at the people in their cars, filming and watching. He thought about fighting this, about refusing, about demanding his rights. But he also thought about the stories he'd heard, about situations like this that had ended with someone hurt or worse. Slowly, Thomas turned around and placed his hands behind his back. The metal cuffs clicked around his wrists, too tight, biting into his skin. You're making a mistake, Thomas said quietly. The only mistake, Matthews said, leading him toward the patrol car, was you thinking you could talk your way out of this. As Thomas was guided into the back of the patrol car, his head carefully pushed down to clear the door frame, he caught sight of his own vehicle still sitting there on the shoulder, doors open, belongings scattered. His military jacket lay in the dirt like a discarded rag. The younger officer was gathering Thomas's things, at least trying to secure the vehicle. But it was small comfort as the door slammed shut, and Thomas found himself caged in the back of a police car, arrested for crimes he didn't commit, judged for reasons that had nothing to do with justice. Through the window, he could see more soldiers driving past, more phones coming out, more witnesses to his humiliation. The word was spreading fast now. Soon everyone on base would know. Soon his commander would know. And Officer Matthews, sitting in the front seat filing his report, had no idea what storm he'd just created. The inside of the patrol car smelled like stale coffee and cleaning chemicals. Thomas sat in the back seat, his hands cuffed behind him, the plastic seat uncomfortable and unforgiving. Through the metal grate separating him from the front, He could see Officer Matthews typing on his computer, taking his time, in no rush at all. Thomas tried to adjust his position, but the handcuffs made it almost impossible to get comfortable. His shoulders ached from having his arms pulled back. His wrists hurt where the metal cut into his skin. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the anger and frustration building inside him. He'd done nothing wrong, nothing. And yet, here he was, arrested, treated like a criminal in sight of the very base where he served his country. Matthews finally finished whatever he was doing on the computer and started the car. The engine rumbled to life and they began moving down the road away from Thomas's vehicle, away from the base toward the police station. "Officer Matthews," Thomas said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I need to contact my commanding officer. I have that right." Matthews adjusted his rearview mirror to look at Thomas. "You'll get your phone call at the station. Be patient. This is a mistake." "You know this is a mistake. The only mistake is you thinking you're above the law." Matthews turned his attention back to the road. Thomas leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. He thought about his morning, how normal it had been. He'd woken up at 5, gone for a run, showered, and headed to base. He'd spent the day leading training exercises, reviewing security protocols, doing paperwork. Just another day of service. And now this. His phone was still in his pocket, but with his hands cuffed behind him, he couldn't reach it. Even if he could, he knew Matthews would just take it away. He was completely cut off, completely powerless. Back at the scene, the younger officer was still dealing with Thomas's car. A small group of off-duty soldiers had gathered at a safe distance, some of them filming, others making phone calls. One of them, a staff sergeant named Rodriguez who worked in the same unit as Thomas, was already on the phone with their commanding officer. "Sir, you need to know what's happening," Rodriguez said urgently. "Sergeant Williams just got arrested right outside the base." "We watched the whole thing." The cop had no reason. Thomas was completely respectful. "This is bad, sir. Really bad." Colonel Peterson, on the other end of the line, asked several quick questions. "What time did it happen? Which officer made the arrest? Where are they taking him?" Rodriguez answered each one while continuing to film the scene with his phone. "Sir, we've got multiple videos. Everyone's recording it. This is going to blow up fast." The colonel's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Send me everything you have. I'm making some calls now. Keep me updated on his location." Meanwhile, the patrol car carrying Thomas pulled into the parking lot of the police station. It was a modest building, brick and concrete with a flag out front and a few patrol cars parked in designated spaces. To Thomas, it looked like any other small-town police station. He never imagined he'd see the inside of one as a prisoner. Matthews parked and came around to open the back door. "Let's go. And don't try anything stupid." "I'm not going to try anything," Thomas said wearily. "I've been cooperative this entire time." Matthews pulled him out of the car, keeping a firm grip on his arm. They walked through a side entrance, passing a few officers who glanced at them with mild curiosity before returning to their own business. Inside, the station was busy with the usual afternoon activity. Phones ringing, officers talking, someone complaining loudly from one of the holding cells. Matthews led Thomas to a processing area where another officer sat behind a desk with a computer. This officer, older and heavy-set with gray hair, looked up from his paperwork. "What have we got, Matthews?" "Disorderly conduct, obstruction of justice, possible identity fraud," Matthews rattled off. "Pulled him over near the base. Got hostile when I tried to verify his ID." The older officer raised an eyebrow. "Identity fraud? Claims to be military. ID looks fake to me." Thomas couldn't stay silent anymore. "My ID is not fake. I'm Sergeant Thomas Williams, stationed at Fort Henderson. Everything I told Officer Matthews is true. He arrested me without cause." "He'll get his chance to tell his story," Matthews said dismissively. "Process him." The older officer looked between them, sensing something off about the situation, but he began the intake process anyway. "Empty your pockets. Put everything on the counter." With the handcuffs finally removed, Thomas rubbed his sore wrists and began taking items from his pockets. His wallet, his keys, his phone, some change. His military ID was still with Matthews, who tossed it onto the counter like it was worthless. The older officer picked up the ID and examined it more carefully than Matthews ever had. He turned it over, held it up to the light, checked the holographic elements. "This looks real to me, Matthews. So do a lot of fakes." But this has all the security features. The encoding strip, the hologram, the microprinting. These aren't easy to fake. Matthews shrugged. Run him through the system. Let's see what comes up. While they processed his information, Thomas stood there trying to maintain his dignity. Other officers walked by, some giving him curious looks. He could hear their whispered conversations. Who's that? Matthews brought him in. What did he do? The older officer typed on his computer, waiting for results. His expression gradually changed from neutral to confused to concerned. Matthews, his record is completely clean. No warrants, no priors, nothing. And his military ID is checking out. He's exactly who he says he is. So? Matthews crossed his arms. Clean record doesn't mean he didn't commit a crime today. What crime exactly? What did you observe him doing? He was acting suspicious, evasive, got hostile when I questioned him. You saw him commit a traffic violation? Matthews hesitated. He was driving erratically. Was he speeding? No, but running lights? Weaving? Anything? Look, I used my judgment as an officer. I saw something suspicious. I investigated. That's my job. The older officer sighed and looked at Thomas. You have the right to make a phone call. Thank you, Thomas said. I need to call my commanding officer. Your commanding officer? A new voice entered the conversation. The police chief, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, had emerged from her office. You're military? Yes, ma'am. Sergeant Thomas Williams. I'm stationed at Fort Henderson, and I've been wrongfully arrested. The chief looked at Matthews with sharp eyes. What's going on here, Matthews? Matthews launched into his version of events, painting Thomas as uncooperative and suspicious. But even as he talked, the chief's expression grew more skeptical. She picked up Thomas's military ID and examined it herself. This looks legitimate to me. She turned to the older officer. Did you verify it? Yes, Chief. It checked out. He's active duty, stationed at Fort Henderson, just like he said. The chief was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking through the implications. Fort Henderson wasn't just any base. It was a major military installation, and the relationship between the local police and the base command was carefully maintained. Wrongfully arresting one of their soldiers, especially without cause, could create serious problems. But before she could say anything more, the station's front door opened with force. A military officer in full uniform strode in, followed by two others. The lead officer, a captain with sharp eyes and an air of authority, scanned the room until she spotted Thomas. Sergeant Williams, she said. Are you all right? I'm fine, ma'am. Just confused about why I'm here. The captain turned to the chief. I'm Captain Morrison from Fort Henderson. We received multiple reports that one of our soldiers was arrested. I'm here to verify his status and ensure his rights are being protected. The police chief straightened. Captain Morrison, I'm Chief Davis. I was just getting briefed on this situation myself. Good. Because I have to tell you, Chief, this incident has already generated significant attention. Multiple soldiers witnessed the arrest and have been filing reports. Videos are being shared, and I have to say, from what I've been told, this arrest appears to be without merit. Matthews stepped forward. Now wait a minute. Captain Morrison cut him off with a look. I'll need to see all documentation related to this arrest. The original reason for the stop, the probable cause for the search, and the legal basis for the arrest itself. The room had gone very quiet. Other officers had stopped what they were doing to watch. Everyone could feel the tension, could sense that this situation was rapidly spinning beyond a simple arrest. Thomas stood there, still in handcuffs, watching as the reality of what Matthews had done began to dawn on everyone present. This wasn't just going to go away. This was going to be a problem. A big problem. And Officer Matthews, who had been so confident just an hour ago, was starting to realize that he'd made a terrible mistake. While Officer Matthews stood in the police station trying to justify his actions, something powerful was happening outside those walls. The videos that had been taken by passing soldiers weren't just sitting on phones. They were moving, spreading, reaching people who needed to see them. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez sat in his truck, his fingers moving quickly across his phone screen. He'd already sent the first video to Colonel Peterson, but now he was uploading it to the base's internal communication system. Other soldiers who'd witnessed the arrest were doing the same thing. Within minutes, soldiers across Fort Henderson were watching Thomas Williams being handcuffed on the side of the road. The reactions came fast. Text messages flooded in. Phone calls started. Soldiers who knew Thomas, who'd served with him, who'd trained under him, were shocked and angry. This wasn't just any soldier. This was Sergeant Williams, a good man, a respected leader. Someone who'd never caused trouble, never broken rules, never gave anyone a reason to doubt his character. In the base communications center, a young specialist, named Chen, was monitoring social media when he noticed something unusual. The video of Thomas's arrest had somehow made it beyond the military networks. Someone had shared it publicly, and it was starting to gain traction. Views were climbing, comments were pouring in, shares were multiplying. Chen immediately called his supervisor. "Sir, you need to see this. The Williams arrest video is going viral." His supervisor pulled up the video on his own screen and watched with growing concern. The footage was clear, damning even. It showed Thomas being respectful and calm. It showed Matthews being aggressive and dismissive. It showed an obvious injustice playing out in real time. "Get this to public affairs immediately," the supervisor ordered. "And notify command. This is going to blow up bigger than we thought." He was right. Within the hour, the video had tens of thousands of views. People were tagging news outlets, civil rights organizations, military advocacy groups. The hashtags started forming. Justice for Sergeant Williams, or Military Lives Matter, End Police Bias. Back at Fort Henderson, Colonel Peterson was in his office making phone calls. He'd already spoken to Captain Morrison, who was at the police station. Now he was calling someone much higher up the chain of command. Someone who needed to know about this immediately. The phone rang twice before a deep voice answered. "General Mitchell." "Sir, this is Colonel Peterson at Fort Henderson. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention." General James Mitchell, the base commander, set down the report he'd been reading. "Go ahead, Colonel." "One of our soldiers, Sergeant Thomas Williams, was arrested by local police about an hour ago. From all accounts and video evidence, the arrest was without merit. The officer appeared to target him without cause, conducted an illegal search, and arrested him on false charges." There was a pause. "Thomas Williams?" "Yes, sir." "I believe you know him." "I know him very well, Colonel. Where is he now?" "At the local police station. Captain Morrison is there now trying to sort it out." "But sir, there's more. The arrest was filmed. It's already spreading on social media. This is going to become a major incident." The general's voice hardened. "I'm on my way. Tell Captain Morrison to stay there and ensure Sergeant Williams is not mistreated further. I'll be at that station in 20 minutes. Colonel Peterson hung up and allowed himself a small, grim smile. Officer Matthews had no idea what was coming. No idea at all. At the police station, Matthews was getting defensive as Captain Morrison pressed him for details. "Look, I don't need to explain every decision I make in the field. I'm a trained police officer. I know suspicious behavior when I see it." "What specifically was suspicious?" Captain Morrison asked. "I've read your report. You stated he was driving a nice car near the base. That's not suspicious. That's normal." He looked nervous when I approached. "According to witnesses, he was calm and cooperative. We have video showing he was respectful throughout." "Those videos don't show everything," Chief Davis intervened. "Matthews, enough. I need you to step outside while I speak with the captain." Matthews reluctantly left, and the chief turned to Captain Morrison. "I apologize for this situation. I'm reviewing the arrest, and frankly, I'm not seeing justification for it." "Neither am I," the captain agreed. "And I have to tell you, Chief, this is going to get complicated. Sergeant Williams isn't just any soldier." "What do you mean?" Before the captain could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the message and her expression changed. "The general is on his way here. He'll be arriving shortly." "The base commander is coming personally?" Chief Davis felt her stomach drop. This was worse than she thought. Thomas, still standing nearby, heard this and felt relief wash over him. The general was coming. That meant this would be resolved. But he also felt a deep sadness. He shouldn't need the base commander to intervene for him to be treated fairly. Any citizen should receive better treatment than what he'd experienced today. Outside the station, a news van pulled into the parking lot. The reporter, a woman named Ashley Grant from the local news station, had been scrolling through social media when she saw the video. She recognized the location, recognized the significance, and knew this was a story that needed to be told. Her cameraman was already setting up as she approached the station entrance. Another officer blocked her way. "Can I help you?" Ashley Grant, Channel 7 News. "We're here about the arrest of Sergeant Williams. We'd like to speak with Chief Davis." "The chief is busy right now." "I'm sure she is. We'll wait." Ashley positioned herself where she could see the entrance. She wasn't leaving until she got answers. Back inside, Matthews was pacing in the break room, finally starting to realize the magnitude of his mistake. The younger officer who'd been at the scene earlier approached him cautiously. "Matthews, I think you should know. People are talking. The videos are everywhere. This looks really bad." "I was doing my job. Were you? Because from where I was standing, it looked like you targeted that man for no reason." Matthews turned away, not wanting to hear it, but he could feel the walls closing in. He could sense the change in atmosphere. Other officers were giving him looks, some sympathetic, others judgmental. The whispers followed him wherever he went. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Are you okay? Someone just sent me a video." "Is that you?" He didn't respond. What could he say? That yes, it was him, and yes, he'd probably just destroyed his career over nothing? That he'd let his prejudices and his ego drive him to arrest an innocent man? The front door of the station opened again, and this time it wasn't a reporter. It was a group of soldiers in uniform, not there to cause trouble, but to show support for one of their own. They stood quietly outside, a silent presence that spoke volumes. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was among them. He held a sign that simply read, "We stand with Sergeant Williams." Others had similar signs. "Justice for all. Innocent until proven guilty. Respect our service." Chief Davis saw them through her window and rubbed her temples. This was spiraling fast. She needed to make this right before it got even worse. She turned to Captain Morrison. "What would it take to resolve this quickly and appropriately? Drop all charges immediately, release Sergeant Williams, and conduct a full investigation into Officer Matthews' conduct. Those videos are going to be examined by a lot of people. You need to be on the right side of this." The chief nodded slowly. She was already thinking the same thing. But before she could give the order, she heard it. The distinctive sound of multiple vehicles pulling up with purpose. She looked out the window and her breath caught. A convoy of military vehicles had arrived. Not just any vehicles, but official command vehicles. And stepping out of the lead vehicle was a 3-star general in full dress uniform. His bearing unmistakable, his presence commanding. General James Mitchell had arrived, and he did not look happy. The soldiers standing outside immediately came to attention. The reporters turned their cameras toward him. And inside the station, everyone stopped what they were doing to watch as the general approached. Matthews, seeing this through the break room window, felt all the color drain from his face. This wasn't just the base commander coming to check on a soldier. This was something else entirely, something that made his blood run cold. "Who is that?" he asked the younger officer. "That's General Mitchell. 3-star general. Commands the entire base." The younger officer paused, then added quietly, "I heard he knows Sergeant Williams personally." Matthews gripped the edge of the table. This couldn't get any worse, but it was about to. General James Mitchell walked through the police station doors with the kind of authority that comes from decades of military service and command. He was a tall man, still fit in his early 50s, with silver hair cut in a precise military style. 3 stars gleamed on his uniform and multiple ribbons decorated his chest, telling the story of a distinguished career. Behind him came 2 majors from his command staff and a military lawyer, all in dress uniform. This wasn't a casual visit. This was official. This was serious. Every officer in the station felt it. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. People stood up straighter. Even the ringing phone seemed to quiet down, as if the building itself recognized that something significant was happening. Chief Davis emerged from her office immediately, her expression a mixture of concern and professionalism. "General Mitchell, I wasn't expecting—" "Where is Sergeant Williams?" The general's voice was calm but carried an edge that left no room for delay. "He's in the processing area, sir. I was just about to take me to him. Now." The chief led the way and the general's entourage followed. Officers stepped aside to let them pass, some recognizing the general, others simply responding to the unmistakable air of command he projected. When they reached the processing area, Thomas was still standing near the counter, no longer in handcuffs but still very much under arrest. He looked up and saw the general approaching. His eyes widened and he immediately came to attention despite not being in uniform. "Sergeant Williams," the general said, his stern expression softening slightly as he looked at the younger man. "Are you injured?" "No, sir. I'm fine, sir. Has anyone here mistreated you?" Thomas hesitated, glancing at the officers around them. "Sir, I was arrested without cause and treated disrespectfully, but I haven't been physically harmed." The general's jaw tightened. He turned to Chief Davis. "I want to see the arrest report. I want to see the dashcam footage from the patrol car. And I want to speak with the officer who made this arrest." "Of course, General. Let me get those materials for you." Chief Davis signaled to the older officer at the desk. "Get Officer Matthews in here immediately." While they waited, the general positioned himself beside Thomas, a silent but powerful show of support. The military lawyer began taking notes, asking Thomas quiet questions about the incident. Captain Morrison briefed the general on what she'd learned so far. "Sir, from all accounts, the stop was without merit. The search was illegal. The arrest appears to be based on nothing more than Officer Matthews' prejudice." The general's expression darkened. "Prejudice, yes, sir. That's what the evidence suggests." Officer Matthews entered the room, and for a moment he froze. He'd dealt with authority before, had supervisors and commanders in the police force, but this was different. This was a 3-star general, and the man looked at him with eyes that had commanded thousands of soldiers, that had made life-and-death decisions, that missed nothing. Matthews tried to compose himself. "You wanted to see me, Chief?" "Officer Matthews, this is General Mitchell, the commanding officer of Fort Henderson. He has questions about the arrest you made today." The general didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Officer Matthews, I've been briefed on this incident. I want to hear your explanation for why you arrested one of my soldiers." Matthews swallowed hard. "Sir, I pulled over a vehicle for suspicious behavior. The driver was evasive and uncooperative. He presented what I believed to be fraudulent identification. When he continued to be hostile, I made the decision to arrest him for disorderly conduct and obstruction." "Suspicious behavior," the general repeated. "What specifically did you observe that was suspicious?" He was driving near the base in an expensive vehicle. His behavior when I approached seemed nervous. Driving near a military base where he works is suspicious? Being nervous when pulled over by police is suspicious? I used my judgment as a trained officer, sir." "Your judgment." The general's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Let me tell you about Sergeant Williams, since your judgment clearly failed to recognize who he is. He's been in service for 8 years. He's completed 2 tours overseas. He's received commendations for valor and leadership. He's trained hundreds of soldiers. His record is spotless. And today, while returning home from duty, he was pulled over, searched without cause, and arrested on false charges." Matthews started to respond, but the general continued. "I've been sent multiple videos of this incident. I've seen how you treated him. I've heard how you dismissed his military identification. I've watched you search his vehicle without legal justification. And I've seen you arrest a man who did nothing wrong except drive while being black." The room went completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. "General, I didn't," Matthews began. "You didn't what? Didn't think? Didn't consider that your actions might be based on bias rather than actual law enforcement? Didn't care that you were violating the rights of a soldier who has sworn to defend this country?" Chief Davis stepped forward carefully. "General Mitchell, I assure you we take these allegations very seriously. I intend to conduct a full investigation." The general turned to her. "An investigation is a start, Chief Davis, but right now I want to know on what grounds my soldier is being held. I've read the arrest report. There's no traffic violation listed, no crime observed, just vague accusations of suspicious behavior and disorderly conduct. That's not law enforcement. That's harassment." The military lawyer spoke up. "Chief Davis, based on my review of the incident, there was no probable cause for the stop, no legal justification for the search, and no valid reason for the arrest. Sergeant Williams' constitutional rights have been violated. The military is prepared to pursue this matter through appropriate legal channels if necessary. Chief Davis looked at Matthews, then at the general, then at Thomas, still standing there with quiet dignity. She'd been a police chief for 15 years. She knew when an arrest was bad. This one was terrible. General, I'm prepared to release Sergeant Williams immediately and drop all charges. That's a start, the general said, but it's not enough. He walked over to Thomas and, to everyone's surprise, his stern expression cracked slightly. I got here as fast as I could. I know, sir. Thank you for coming. The general turned back to the room. What happened here today is unacceptable. Sergeant Williams serves this country with honor. He deserves better than this. Every citizen deserves better than this. Matthews stood there, his face red, his hands trembling slightly. He wanted to defend himself, wanted to explain, but what could he say? The videos didn't lie. His own report was weak, and standing before him was a 3-star general who clearly wasn't going to accept any excuses. Chief Davis, the general continued, I want a formal investigation into this incident and into Officer Matthews' conduct. I want regular updates. And I want to know what steps your department is taking to ensure this never happens again to any of my soldiers, or to any citizen. You have my word, General. This will be handled appropriately. It better be, because I can assure you the military will be watching closely. The media will be watching closely. And so will a lot of people who care about justice and civil rights. The general signaled to his staff. Get Sergeant Williams processed out. I want him out of this building in the next 5 minutes. The older officer at the desk moved quickly, gathering Thomas's belongings and completing the release paperwork. Thomas signed where indicated, got his phone and keys and wallet back, retrieved his military ID. Throughout all of this, Matthews stood frozen, watching his career crumble in real time. He could see it in the chief's eyes. He could feel it in the room. He'd made a terrible mistake, and there would be consequences. As Thomas was finally cleared to leave, the general placed a hand on his shoulder. Come on, let's get you out of here. We'll talk more back at the base. They walked toward the exit together, the general's staff surrounding them, a protective formation that spoke volumes. As they passed Matthews, the general paused and looked at him one more time. You had a chance today, Officer Matthews. A chance to see a young man, a soldier, a fellow citizen, and treat him with the respect every person deserves. Instead, you saw only what your prejudice allowed you to see. I hope you learn from this. I truly do. They continued walking, pushing through the station doors into the afternoon sunlight. The soldiers who'd been standing vigil outside broke into applause. The reporters surged forward with questions. Cameras flashed, but the general simply led Thomas to his vehicle, sheltering him from the chaos. As they drove away from the police station, Thomas finally allowed himself to relax slightly. Sir, I don't know what to say. The general glanced at him. You don't have to say anything. What happened today was wrong, and we're going to make sure everyone knows it. Thomas looked out the window, watching the police station disappear behind them. Inside that building, Officer Matthews was facing the reality of his actions. And back at Fort Henderson, preparations were already underway to ensure this injustice wouldn't be swept under the rug. This was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The drive back to Fort Henderson was quiet at first. Thomas sat in the back of the general's vehicle, still processing everything that had happened. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind exhaustion and a hollow feeling in his chest. General Mitchell sat in the front passenger seat, occasionally glancing back to check on him. The driver, a young specialist, kept his eyes on the road, but Thomas could tell he was listening to every word. How are you really doing? The general asked, breaking the silence. Thomas took a moment before answering. Honestly, sir, I'm tired, and angry, and confused. I did everything right. I was respectful. I followed every instruction. And it didn't matter, I know. Do you, sir? With all respect, do you really know what it feels like to be treated like that? To be seen as a threat just because of how you look? The general was quiet for a moment. You're right. I don't know exactly how that feels. But I know it's wrong, and I know we're going to do something about it. They pulled through the base gates, the guards saluting as they recognized the general's vehicle. Word had already spread throughout Fort Henderson. Soldiers stopped what they were doing to watch as the convoy passed. Some saluted. Others held up supportive signs. The solidarity was overwhelming. When they arrived at the command building, Colonel Peterson was waiting at the entrance. He came to attention as the general stepped out, then immediately moved to Thomas. "Sergeant Williams, I'm glad you're all right. This should never have happened." "Thank you, sir." They went inside, heading to the general's conference room. Once the door was closed and they were seated around the large table, the general leaned back in his chair and looked at Thomas with an expression that mixed professional concern with something more personal. "Before we talk about next steps, there's something you should know," the general said. "Something I haven't told many people at this base." Thomas looked confused. "Sir?" The general took a breath as if steeling himself. "Sergeant Williams, the reason I responded so quickly today, the reason I came personally instead of sending staff, isn't just because you're a good soldier. It's because your family." The room went still. Thomas's eyes widened. "Sir, I don't understand. Your mother's name is Angela Williams, correct?" "She was Angela Carter before she married your father." "Yes, sir, but Angela Carter is my cousin. We grew up together, spent summers at our grandmother's house in Virginia. We lost touch after she moved away, but I've always kept track of her. Kept track of you. When you enlisted 8 years ago and I saw your name come through the system, I knew exactly who you were." Thomas sat back in his chair, stunned. "You knew?" "This whole time, I did. And I've been watching your career with pride. Every commendation, every promotion, every successful mission. I've seen it all." Colonel Peterson, who clearly hadn't known this either, looked equally surprised. The general continued, "I didn't make it public because I didn't want to influence your career one way or another. You've earned everything you've achieved on your own merit. But today, when I heard what happened, there was no question whether I'd come. You're not just a soldier under my command. You're family." Thomas struggled to find words. "Sir, I had no idea. Mom never mentioned. She probably didn't know I was here. I've been at Henderson for 2 years, but like I said, we'd lost touch. I planned to reach out properly to reconnect, but I wanted to do it the right way." The general's expression hardened. "I never imagined circumstances like this would force the issue." Back at the police station, Officer Matthews was in Chief Davis's office, and the atmosphere was tense. The chief had just finished watching all the videos from different angles, had read through the arrest report again, and had spoken with the other officers present. "Matthews, I'm going to ask you something and I want an honest answer," Chief Davis said. "Did you pull over Sergeant Williams because he's black?" Matthews' face went red. "Chief, I'm not a racist. I don't see color. That's not what I asked. I asked if his race was a factor in your decision to pull him over." Matthews struggled with his answer. He was in a nice car. Young black guy in an expensive car near a military base. It seemed suspicious." "Why did it seem suspicious?" Because usually when I see that, there's something wrong." Chief Davis rubbed her temples. "Do you hear yourself? You profiled him. You made assumptions based entirely on his race and the car he was driving. That's textbook discrimination. I was doing my job." "No, Matthews. You were letting your biases do your job for you, and now we have a crisis on our hands." She turned her computer screen toward him. "Do you see this? The video of your arrest has over 200,000 views now. News outlets are picking it up. Civil rights groups are calling, and the military is preparing formal complaints." Matthews slumped in his chair. "I didn't mean for this to happen, but it did happen. And here's what else you didn't know." Chief Davis pulled up information on her computer. "Sergeant Williams isn't just any soldier. He's a decorated veteran. 2 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star. He saved 6 members of his unit during an ambush in his last deployment. He's been recommended for promotion to staff sergeant. And," she paused for emphasis, "he's related to General Mitchell." The color drained from Matthew's face. "What? They're family. So not only did you arrest an innocent, decorated soldier, you arrested the base commander's relative. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done?" Matthews sat there speechless. His hands trembled slightly. His career, his reputation, everything he'd worked for was collapsing around him. "Chief, I swear I didn't know. I thought I was—" "You thought you were what? Keeping people safe? From a soldier driving home from work?" Chief Davis's voice was sharp. "Matthews, I've looked at your record. This isn't the first complaint against you. There have been 3 other incidents where citizens claimed you targeted them based on race. We dismissed them because there wasn't enough evidence. But this time there's video. Clear, undeniable video." A knock on the door interrupted them. Another officer stuck his head in. "Chief, the mayor is on line 1. And there are protesters gathering outside. Chief Davis sighed heavily. Tell the mayor I'll call him back in 10 minutes. She turned back to Matthews. You're suspended effective immediately. Turn in your badge and weapon. There will be a full investigation, and I suspect there will be criminal charges filed against you for violating Sergeant Williams's civil rights. Criminal charges? Matthews' voice cracked. You illegally detained and arrested someone based on racial bias. Yes, criminal charges are likely. The FBI may get involved. This is a civil rights violation. Matthews stood on shaky legs and removed his badge, setting it on the chief's desk. He unholstered his weapon and placed it beside the badge. 8 years as a police officer, and it was over in a single afternoon. Back at Fort Henderson, the general was outlining the next steps to Thomas and Colonel Peterson. First, we're filing formal complaints with the police department and with federal authorities. What happened today was a civil rights violation, and it needs to be treated as such. Sir, Thomas spoke up, I appreciate everything you're doing, but I don't want this to become about me being your family member. That shouldn't matter. What should matter is that this was wrong, period. It would have been wrong if I was just any soldier, any citizen. The general smiled slightly. You're absolutely right. And that's exactly the point we're going to make. The fact that you're my relative might have gotten me to that station faster, but the response would be the same regardless. This is about justice and accountability. Colonel Peterson nodded. We're already getting calls from other soldiers who've had similar experiences with local police. Not all as dramatic as yours, but pulled over for no reason, questioned excessively, treated with suspicion. Then this is bigger than just me, Thomas said. This is a pattern. Exactly, the general agreed. And we're going to address it. I'm meeting with Chief Davis tomorrow to discuss reforms, training, accountability measures. This incident is going to be a catalyst for change. There was another knock on the door. Captain Morrison entered with her tablet. Sir, the media requests are piling up. Everyone wants to interview Sergeant Williams. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, local stations, newspapers. What should we tell them? Thomas looked at the general. Sir, permission to speak to the media? You don't need my permission. But are you sure you want to? Yes, sir. People need to hear this story. Not because I'm special, but because this happens too often. If sharing what happened to me can help prevent it from happening to someone else, then I should do it. The general studied him for a moment, then nodded with clear respect. You're a good man, Thomas. Your mother raised you right. She did, sir. And I think it's time I called her and told her about her cousin who's been watching over me all these years. The general's stern expression softened into something warmer. I'd like that. After everything settles down, I'd like to have dinner with you and your family. Properly reconnect. I'd like that too, sir. As the meeting continued, discussing legal strategies and media approaches, Officer Matthews was walking out of the police station for the last time as an officer. Protesters jeered at him. Reporters shouted questions. He kept his head down and hurried to his car. He sat in the driver's seat, not starting the engine. 3 days after the incident, Chief Davis sat in her office preparing for one of the most difficult meetings of her career. Across from her sat representatives from the FBI's Civil Rights Division, the State Attorney General's office, and the mayor's legal team. The small room felt crowded with authority and consequence. Let me be clear about where we stand, said Agent Foster from the FBI. We've reviewed all the video evidence, witness statements, and Officer Matthews' own report. This is a clear-cut case of racial profiling and false arrest. The Justice Department is prepared to file federal charges. The state attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Reynolds, nodded in agreement. We're pursuing charges at the state level as well. Deprivation of rights under color of law, false imprisonment, and potentially others pending our full investigation. Chief Davis had known this was coming, but hearing it stated so plainly still hit hard. I understand. Matthews has been suspended without pay pending the outcome of these investigations. But I need you to understand that this reflects on my entire department, and we're committed to making significant changes. Changes are necessary, Agent Foster said, but they need to be substantive, not cosmetic. We'll be monitoring your department closely. Down the hall, Officer Matthews sat in an interrogation room, his union lawyer beside him. He'd gone from being the one asking questions to being the one answering them. And the irony wasn't lost on anyone. The internal affairs investigator, Lieutenant Harris, laid out photographs from the incident. Officer Matthews, I want to walk through your decision-making process. What specifically made you decide to pull over Sergeant Williams' vehicle? Matthews glanced at his lawyer, who nodded. I saw a vehicle that seemed out of place. An expensive car in that area made me suspicious. Why did an expensive car make you suspicious? Because in my experience, that combination often indicates criminal activity. Lieutenant Harris leaned forward. What combination specifically? Matthews hesitated. His lawyer put a hand on his arm, but Matthews continued anyway. A young black man driving an expensive car. The room went quiet. It was the first time Matthews had explicitly admitted what everyone already knew. So you profiled him based on race, Lieutenant Harris stated flatly. Yes. I did. His lawyer closed his eyes, knowing that admission would make everything harder to defend. At Fort Henderson, Thomas sat in a conference room doing his first television interview. The reporter, a respected journalist named David Chen, had been fair in his questions so far, but now they were getting to the heart of the matter. Sergeant Williams, some people might say you should be grateful that the general intervened, that your connection to him is what got you justice. What do you say to that? Thomas looked directly into the camera. I am grateful for the general's support. But here's the thing that people need to understand. I shouldn't have needed that support. Justice shouldn't depend on who you know or who your family is. Every person, regardless of their connections, deserves to be treated fairly by law enforcement. The fact that I needed a 3-star general to come rescue me from an unjust arrest shows how broken the system is. Do you think what happened to you was about race? I think it's hard to see it any other way. Officer Matthews pulled me over for no legal reason. He searched my car without cause. He dismissed my valid military ID. And through all of it, I was calm, respectful, and cooperative. What was different about me that made him treat me like a criminal? I can only think of one thing. The interview was being broadcast live, and across the country people were watching. In living rooms and break rooms, in barbershops and coffee shops, the conversation was happening. Some people understood immediately. Others were starting to understand. And some still refused to see it. Back at the police station, the younger officer who'd been at the scene was being interviewed by Internal Affairs. His name was Officer Ryan Cooper, and he'd been on the force for only 2 years. Officer Cooper, you were called as backup to the scene. What was your impression when you arrived? Cooper shifted uncomfortably. Honestly, sir, I thought Officer Matthews was making a mistake. The man he'd detained was clearly not a threat. He was cooperative. His ID looked legitimate. But Matthews was insistent. Did you speak up? I tried to. I told Matthews the ID looked real. But he pulled rank on me. He's a senior officer and I'm still relatively new. I didn't feel I had the authority to challenge him further. Lieutenant Harris made notes. Did you consider calling a supervisor? I thought about it. I should have done it. But I didn't, and that's on me. I should have stood up for what was right. Regardless of rank or experience. It was an honest answer, and in many ways, it illustrated another problem within the system. Good officers who saw wrongdoing but felt powerless to stop it. Chief Davis was implementing changes rapidly. She'd already contacted 3 different organizations that specialized in police reform and bias training. She'd established a civilian review board. She'd updated use of force policies and search protocols. But she knew these changes would be viewed with skepticism until they were proven through action. In a community center near the police station, a town hall meeting was taking place. The room was packed with citizens, soldiers, local leaders, and media. The tension was palpable. General Mitchell stood at the podium with Chief Davis beside him. It was an unusual pairing, military and civilian law enforcement, but the situation demanded it. Thank you all for coming, the general began. I know emotions are high right now. They should be. What happened to Sergeant Williams was wrong, and it sparked a necessary conversation about how law enforcement interacts with our community, especially with people of color. A woman in the audience stood up. General, with all respect, it's easy for you to say that now. But what about the soldiers who don't have your protection? What about the civilians who get treated this way every day with no one to help them? You're absolutely right, the general acknowledged. That's exactly why we're here. This can't be just about one incident or one person. This needs to be about systemic change. Chief Davis took the microphone. I want to apologize first and foremost. What happened on my watch by one of my officers was unacceptable. I take responsibility for that. But I also commit to you that we will do better. We're implementing mandatory bias training for all officers. We're establishing clearer accountability measures. We're creating channels for community oversight. And officers who violate civil rights will face consequences. What about Officer Matthews? Someone called out. Is he going to jail? There are multiple investigations ongoing, Chief Davis replied. Both federal and state authorities are involved. I can't speak to specific charges, but I can tell you that he will face the full weight of accountability for his actions. In his apartment across town, Matthews watched the town hall on television. His wife sat beside him, having taken time off work to support him through this crisis. His teenage daughter was in her room, having dealt with bullies at school who'd seen the videos and made cruel comments. They're going to make an example of me, Matthews said quietly. His wife took his hand. Did you do what they say you did? He was quiet for a long moment. Yes, I did. Then you have to face it. You have to take responsibility. I know. I just never thought. I never saw myself as prejudiced. I always thought I was fair. But you weren't. And now you have to own that. Matthews nodded, tears forming in his eyes. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. He might face prison time. But more than all of that, he had to live with the knowledge that he'd harmed an innocent person, that he'd let his unconscious biases override his duty to serve and protect all citizens equally. Back at Fort Henderson, Thomas was meeting with other soldiers who'd had similar experiences with local police. There were more than he'd expected. Different officers, different circumstances, but the same underlying pattern of being treated with suspicion and disrespect despite their service. This needs to change, said one soldier, a female staff sergeant who'd been pulled over 3 times in 6 months for minor infractions that white drivers routinely got away with. It will, Thomas promised. We're going to make sure of it. Colonel Peterson entered the room. Sergeant Williams, the FBI wants to interview you tomorrow. They're building their case against Matthews, and your testimony will be crucial. I'll be there, sir. There's something else. We've been contacted by several civil rights organizations. They want to use your case as part of a broader initiative for police reform. Are you comfortable with that? Thomas thought about it. His life had been turned upside down in a matter of days. He'd gone from being a regular soldier doing his job to being the face of a national conversation about racial justice and police accountability. It wasn't a role he'd sought, but it was one he felt compelled to embrace. Yes, sir. If what happened to me can help create change, then I need to be part of that. Over the following weeks, the consequences continued to unfold. Matthews was formally charged with federal civil rights violations and state charges of false imprisonment and official misconduct. If convicted on all counts, he faced up to 10 years in prison. The police department's budget was cut, with funds redirected to community programs and oversight mechanisms. 6 months had passed since that afternoon on the highway. The autumn leaves were falling around Fort Henderson, painting the base in shades of gold and red. But the real change wasn't in the seasons. It was in the community itself. Thomas stood at the podium in the base auditorium looking out at hundreds of faces. There were soldiers in uniform, local police officers, community members, students, and reporters. The turnout for this town hall forum had exceeded all expectations, filling every seat and leaving people standing along the walls. He'd given dozens of speeches over the past months, but this one felt different. This was about looking forward, not just back. This was about what they'd accomplished together and what still needed to be done. When I was arrested 6 months ago, Thomas began, his voice steady and clear. I was angry, confused, hurt. I'd done everything right and it hadn't mattered. But standing here today, I realized something important. What happened to me wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who's ever been judged by how they look rather than who they are. In the audience, his mother sat beside General Mitchell. She'd flown in from Virginia 2 weeks after the incident, overwhelmed to discover her cousin was the base commander and determined to support her son. The two relatives had reconnected, sharing old memories and building new ones. Family had brought them back together, but injustice had revealed just how much they needed each other. Thomas continued. Some people told me to be grateful that the general intervened. And I am grateful. But I shouldn't have to be. Think about that. I shouldn't be grateful that someone had to rescue me from an unjust arrest. That should never have been necessary in the first place. In the back row, Police Chief Davis sat with her command staff. The department looked different now. Officer Matthews was gone, facing trial in 3 months. 2 other officers had resigned during investigations into their conduct. But more importantly, every officer had undergone intensive training on implicit bias, de-escalation, and community policing. It hadn't been easy. Some officers resented the changes, felt they were being unfairly criticized, but others, like Officer Cooper, had embraced the opportunity to be better. Cooper was in the audience too, having become an advocate for reform within the department. "Real change is uncomfortable," Thomas said. "It means admitting that things we thought were normal were actually wrong. It means questioning our assumptions. It means listening to people whose experiences are different from our own." A young black teenager in the audience, no older than 16, watched Thomas with intense focus. His name was Deshaun, and just last week he'd been followed by a store security guard while shopping with his mother. Nothing had happened, but the experience had shaken him, made him feel like he was seen as a criminal just for existing. Seeing Thomas speak gave him hope that maybe things could change. "But uncomfortable doesn't mean impossible," Thomas continued. "In the past 6 months, I've seen incredible change. The local police department has implemented new policies that require clear justification for stops and searches. They've established a civilian review board with real authority. They've partnered with community organizations to build trust." Chief Davis nodded at this. The review board had been controversial within the department, but it was already making a difference. 2 recent complaints had been thoroughly investigated, and in both cases the officers involved had received additional training. Transparency was slowly replacing defensiveness. "The military has strengthened its partnerships with local law enforcement," Thomas went on. "We've created joint training programs where soldiers and officers learn from each other, build relationships, see each other as people rather than just uniforms." General Mitchell smiled slightly. That had been his initiative, and it was working better than he'd hoped. Just last month, he'd watched soldiers and police officers training together, sharing meals, forming friendships. Those personal connections were changing attitudes on both sides. "But I want to be clear about something." Thomas's voice grew more serious. "We've made progress, but we're not done. 6 months ago, I was treated like a criminal because of the color of my skin. That shouldn't happen to anyone, ever. And until we can honestly say it won't happen again, our work isn't finished." The room was silent, everyone hanging on his words. "I've learned something important through all of this. Justice isn't just about punishing people who do wrong. It's about creating systems where wrong is less likely to happen in the first place. It's about building communities where everyone, regardless of their race or background, feels safe and respected." In the 3rd row, Officer Cooper shifted in his seat. He thought about that day, about how he'd seen something wrong but hadn't been strong enough to speak up. Since then, he'd made a promise to himself, never again. He'd already intervened twice when he saw other officers making questionable stops, calmly suggesting they reconsider. Both times his fellow officers had listened. The culture was changing, slowly but surely. Thomas looked around the room, making eye contact with different people. "Some of you here today have experienced what I went through. Maybe not exactly the same, but close enough that you know the fear, the frustration, the feeling of being powerless. I want you to know that your experiences matter. Your voice matters, and things can change." Deshaun, the teenager in the audience, felt tears prick his eyes. Someone understood. Someone who'd been through it was telling him it would get better. "And to those of you who haven't experienced this kind of treatment," Thomas continued, "I ask you to listen. Really listen. Don't dismiss these stories as rare exceptions or exaggerations. They're real. They happen every day, and we all have a responsibility to make them stop." A white soldier in the front row nodded thoughtfully. He'd never been pulled over without reason, never had his ID questioned, never felt threatened by police. He'd always assumed everyone had the same experience he did. This whole situation had opened his eyes to a reality he'd been blind to before. 6 months ago, Officer Matthews made a choice based on his biases, Thomas said. It was a wrong choice, and he's facing consequences for it. But here's what I want everyone to understand. He's not a monster. He's a person who let his unconscious prejudices guide his actions, and if we're honest, most of us have biases we're not fully aware of. The difference is whether we confront them or let them control us. This was a generous perspective, and it surprised some people in the audience. Thomas wasn't calling for revenge or hatred. He was calling for understanding and growth. "I'm not saying what happened to me is okay. It's not. I'm not saying Officer Matthews shouldn't face consequences. He should. What I'm saying is that we can't just focus on individual bad actors. We have to look at the systems that allow bias to flourish. We have to examine our own hearts and minds. Chief Davis felt the weight of those words. She'd spent months examining her department's systems, policies, and culture. What she'd found wasn't comfortable. There were patterns of discriminatory stops she'd been blind to. There were officers with multiple complaints she'd dismissed. There was a culture of protecting each other that had prioritized loyalty over accountability. Changing all of that required courage, and it was ongoing work. "Today, I want to announce something," Thomas said, his voice lifting slightly. "Thanks to the support of General Mitchell, Chief Davis, and several community organizations, we're launching a new program. It's called Bridge Builders, and it's designed to bring together young people from all backgrounds with law enforcement and military personnel. The goal is to build understanding, break down stereotypes, and create relationships based on respect." The room erupted in applause. This was the kind of forward-thinking initiative people had been hoping for. "We're going to have monthly forums where people can share their experiences and concerns in a safe environment. We're creating mentorship programs. We're organizing community service projects where soldiers, police officers, and civilians work side by side. Because that's how change happens. Not through anger and division, but through connection and understanding." General Mitchell stood up and the room quieted. "I'd like to add something, if I may." Thomas stepped aside and the general took the podium. 6 months ago, I got a call that my family member had been wrongfully arrested. I came here with anger and authority, ready to fight for justice. And we did fight for justice. But Sergeant Williams taught me something important. He showed me that justice isn't just about defending our own. It's about defending everyone. It's about creating a world where nobody needs a 3-star general to intervene for them to be treated fairly. The general's voice carried the weight of his years of command. "I've served this country for 30 years. I've seen combat. I've made life and death decisions. But watching what Thomas has done these past 6 months, the grace he's shown, the leadership he's demonstrated, has been one of the most inspiring things I've witnessed. He could have been bitter. He could have been angry. Instead, he chose to be an agent of change." Thomas felt his throat tighten with emotion. The general continued, "The military's relationship with this community is stronger because of what happened. Not despite it, but because of it. Because we didn't just react to an injustice. We used it as a catalyst to build something better.